Hello friends, welcome back to another day at the Never Ending Project. Today we're going to try to do something a little bit more fun. If you've watched the last couple of videos, you know that we're working towards doing quite a few maintenance items on the A3. We've got the timing chain to do, we've got the flywheel to replace, drive axles to replace, we're doing coilovers, I did lower control arms. So got to do all of that, plus everything that involves, you know, getting to it and replacing around it. So it's a bit of work, but anyway, on this episode, we're going to try to get the axles out, and in taking the axles out, I think I'm going to try to also get the coils, the coilovers fitted on today. But anyway, I'll show you guys the coilovers. I'm pretty excited to put these on. They look very, very nice. So these coilovers are from a company called ISC. Did a little digging on them. They have some really good quality. Customer service seems to be pretty solid too. Let me set this down here so you guys can take a peek at it. But yeah, something that I like about them is that they adjust at the body instead of adjusting the spring, which can change preload and ultimately mess with the dynamic of the car depending on how more or less compressed the spring is based on how high or low you want your car. Anyway, here's the box. I know it's a little dark, can't even see it. But anyway, so we're gonna get going with that. The axles are gonna be ready to come out. These are absolutely awful. I don't know if you can see in there, but the boot's pretty torn up. And then I've already pre-lubricated the nut at the end of that pinch bolt, and then tried to get some inside the hub there, so then we can hopefully try to slide that off a little easier. And then from up here, you can see the bolts there. There's one there, and then a few back there. But anyway, 3 bolts, both on either side. That should be pretty solid. And then yeah, so let's go ahead and get started. With that axle out of the car, I've got it laid out next to the new one. So as you can see, very, very clear differences right off the bat. This one's the older tripod style, which is now obsolete. And then these are the ones that you'll find more commonly across the Volkswagen Audi platforms, which are just the round 5 ball bearing inner CVs. And well, you can tell that one's very, very, very dead. If you find yourself in a situation like mine where you've got like an older Volkswagen or Audi, it's gonna be a bit of a spendy transition. It's a steep upfront cost, but it will be a one-time spend. They don't make them anymore, so you're either off buying used, which you'll end up in the same position a lot sooner than you want anyway, or you can just, you know, bite the bullet and transition over to the more standard ones. Now, like I said, in order to transition over to these round CVs, what you'll need to do primarily, which is where the biggest expense lies, is these flanges. So you need to update your flanges. This is what it'll end up being. So very clearly different from the one that's on the car right now. So not only is it round, but also if you look at the axles themselves, the butt end here, that has a bulb that sticks out, whereas this is very flat. So obviously these aren't, you know, interchangeable. But other than that, it should be good to go. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started on the other one and get that one out, and then we should be able to move on to the coilovers. With the axles out of the way, we can move on to the coilovers. These should be relatively easy to do for the most part. We just need to get access to the bolt on the top, so let's go ahead and get the rain tray off. All right, so first coilover's down. That wasn't too tough. You can't really see up there. The toughest part was trying to get this, one, getting the pinch bolt out, and then two, you can see the slit there. In order to get to that, you need a special tool, or at least it's made easier with a tool. That's a spindle spreader tool, but it's got an oval head. It fits right inside that slit, so then when you turn it 90 degrees, it splits it open, and it gives you a little bit of room to pull it out. So with that, you just hammer it in a couple times, or hammer the spindle a couple times. That should break it loose enough. And then, yeah, major difference here. But there we have the standard coil-on spring, and then the coilovers right next to it. But before we proceed, there's actually some very important instructions that we need to follow. So per the manufacturer, the spring needs to have 5 millimeters of compression, and what we're talking about here is they ask 5 millimeters of preload. Now what that's going to do is once the coilover compresses and everything, that 5 millimeters will allow the spring to sit there without bouncing around while you're driving around and stuff like that. So what we need to do is measure out 5 millimeters. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll spin this collar until it completely bottoms out by hand, and then we shouldn't be able to move the spring anymore. And then we need to rotate this. I have the tools right there. I have to pull them out of the bag. But anyway, we'll go ahead and we'll compress these. Now, where I had to do a little bit of the math, they were saying that the spring, I can't even pick this up. So the spring is supposed to be 180 millimeters from top to bottom. Mine was not. Mine was 162. So measuring it out, let's see. So I had 180 millimeters. We need to get to 175. When I measured out, I saw that I was at 6 3/8, which comes out to be 162 millimeters, and that is full extension relaxed spring. So what we did instead is we're going to go from 162 to 157. So we're going to be looking at 6 3/16 is what we're going to want to sit at 157. So once we get that set up, then we should be good. And yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that real quick. I'm gonna do them on both of them. And then once we do both, then we'll need to figure out the height that I want the entire setup at. I'm not entirely sure how I want to do it. What we're gonna do is we're gonna, once I get the springs preloaded, we'll go ahead and pop the first one in, and then we'll get it all bolted up and everything. And then the adjustment will probably have to happen when we set the car down for the first time. And then once that happens, then we can go ahead and kind of measure out where we're sitting and then how much more we want to take away. And then we'll go ahead and spin the entire body, and we should be good. So I got it measured out. We're sitting at 6 3/16 of an inch. And that should be within spec here. And what we're trying to achieve here is you're going to measure from the top of the spring down to the base of the spring, or the base of the coil. Nothing more, nothing less. And yeah, so that should be good and ready. So I think now what I'm going to do is clean that up. There is a bunch of rust and corrosion and stuff. A lot of it should be pretty easy to just wipe off. I did spray a decent amount of lubricant to eat through the rust. I'm just going to pass a rag through it, make sure that I get all that debris out. And then we'll go ahead and start reinstalling. The reinstall process will be the exact same thing in reverse. Should be pretty easy. I will have to clean the bolt too. The bolt I forgot to show. Come on. There we go. So yeah, this is the pinch bolt. So I am going to clean that up quite a bit. It looks pretty atrocious. But yeah, other than that, it should be pretty easy, straightforward, and should definitely go a lot quicker going in than it did coming out. So let's go ahead and knock that out. So I'm kind of annoyed because the camera apparently cut out shortly after I got this on. But anyway, here we are. So the install was considerably easier. So currently I have this extended as far as it goes. So there's a little like porthole on the other side of here, and you can see how far up the inner tube is. I currently have it so I am seeing all of the threads on the other side. So any higher and I would start pulling the threads out of here. Not recommended, but you know, we'll see how high we're going. But anyway, pinch bolts in, spend it on its own, and yeah, it's looking pretty good. It looks considerably higher than it was previously. So, like I said, the real test is going to be once we actually get as far as putting the wheel on, and then dropping the car and then seeing where it sits. But once that happens, then yeah, we can go ahead and start adjusting it, and we can go through that process then. So I'm going to go ahead and get the other side started, finished. You guys don't need to see it again. That one went in a lot faster than the other one. It actually almost even fell off of the hub itself. But anyway, I'll show you guys real quick. So there it is. It definitely went on, like I said, a lot faster. So from here, I think what we're going to do, so I don't know if you can see it from here. So that hose right here, this one right here. That's going to be our coolant line. So unlike the TT, this radiator doesn't actually have like a drain plug, so to speak. So we're just going to pull a hose, let it drain a little bit. And the reason I'm doing that is once we get up here, we're going to have to, like I said, we're going to have to pull that coolant housing off and everything. So yeah, and then we'll go ahead and move on to removing the drive shaft down there. And then, yeah, and then we'll start preparing to drop the transmission. But I think what we'll do before we end this one is I'll start draining the coolant. And while I'm doing that, I didn't actually really show much of this when it came out. So here's the valve cover. I actually cleaned it up. I'm gonna paint it. And you guys will see the color once it's back on the car, or at least in the process of going back in. But while I'm doing that, I actually have to address the PCV. That was actually the primary reason why the car had to go down when it did. The membrane in here finally went out. Now, for those of you that are not super familiar with the VR6, let me get my flashlight quick. The PCV system is pretty much integrated into the valve cover. Now, for a lot of it, I mean, some people, if you're not aware of that, you end up having to replace the valve cover, which sucks because the valve cover can be a little bit spendy. However, what I did was I found a company that makes these membranes. Now, they specifically design these out of materials that are considerably more resilient and robust than OEM. And you can see there are the two pieces. So this is the piece that goes to the EGR. This is a porthole, actually. It's kind of like a breather hole, and I'll show you that. And then the membrane itself for the system. Now, on the back side, you actually have this little pinhole. That pinhole is kind of like an atmospheric breather of some sort. I haven't really dug into it or gone down that rabbit hole. I just very briefly kind of looked into it just to get what I needed. But anyway, this goes to the, I believe this is from the intake manifold onto that little pancake piece on top, and then it goes into here. Well, let's go ahead and get started. So I am using a T20, and there's a few screws holding this housing down, so we'll see if I can take them out with this. Otherwise, I'll grab my screwdriver in my... Alright, so it looks like those are the only 5 screws holding it down, so I think we should be able to wobble this out. Grabbed a few picks here. There we go. Alright. Well, that looks gross. So this is what it looks like. This is the housing. So this isn't really the main issue. The main issue is what's actually inside of here. So we'll go ahead and pop that out real quick and I can show you. All right, so once this thing comes apart, you You can see right here, so it can start to split. So the membrane in here, you just have to be very careful when taking this apart. There's a spring, so that's the inside there. So that's how it kind of just travels its way all around into these little vortex generator looking things here. But yeah, so anyway, we'll keep moving on here. So this membrane tends to rip. What ends up happening is it creates a massive vacuum leak. And generally the way that you can tell is that porthole that I showed you down here, it starts to whistle really loud, and if you put your finger over it, it starts creating internal suction, and it is very audible. So all you have to do when you do this is just remember to keep all of this together. So you have a big spring, you have this little, I don't know, intermediate housing deal here, so the spring sits on the outside, and then you have a smaller spring on the inside. So just make sure that that remains the same. I'll put that down there, make sure it doesn't get knocked over. And then we'll take the inner membrane out. There we go. And there we are. So you can actually see, let me see if I can get you. There's a massive tear right there. I think that's really pretty much it, surprisingly. So it's that tear. But anyway, that tear right there ruins the entire system, and you end up with a massive vacuum leak. So this is considerably cheaper to do by replacing this membrane and then the O-ring on the outside there, as it cost me all of $30 for the entire kit. And it's, I mean, if you're gonna end up doing this, if you're replacing the valve cover because you have a leaking PCV, I mean, you might as well do this instead. You got to take the valve cover off anyway to replace it, so why not just go a little step further and save yourself, I don't know, $400, I think is what they are. But anyway, here's the kit. Comes from this company here. They're called RKX Tech. So we'll go ahead and install this one on real quick. I believe we went on this way, or we'll have to do that after I put the membrane on. I see. Okay, so let's put the membrane on. This is what the new one looks like. Pretty similar. The material it's made of, though, considerably different. A lot thicker, but just as malleable and flexible. Whereas this one, I mean, it's kind of like a rubber glove almost, and you know, over time it gets starts losing its plasticity, and then it starts tearing. This material's, you know, feels very nice. So then we'll go ahead and put this back in, which I believe we sat like that. Let's put our spring back on. It sits in there on there nicely. Now the only thing with this is that you just need to make sure that everything goes on smoothly. I'm actually, before I actually seal this, clean the edges, and then that way I don't end up with any debris not letting me sit. All right, and there we go. And that's it. That's all it took. Honestly, all of 5 minutes to replace that. So I mean, if this is all you're replacing on the car, it's kind of a no-brainer to do this versus buying a whole new valve cover. Save yourself quite a bit of money. All right. And there we are. Now I'm a little bummed because I got my valve cover super dirty after having cleaned it, so clearly I did this in the wrong order. So if you're planning on painting, keep that in mind to do the reverse of what I did. So now that we got all that done, coolant's drained, it's barely even dripping now. We got the PCV done, coilovers are all in and everything, so I think that's what I'm gonna call it with this one. For the next episode though, that's when we'll go ahead and start taking the transmission out finally. Like I said, I am kind of dreading it just because of the amount of work that it requires just for one person to do. Not that it's terribly difficult to do by yourself, but just kind of with the limited space and not having all the tools that I would like to have to be able to do it calmly and quickly and, you know, not breaking anything. You know, it's gonna be a little, it may or may not be a little sketchy. We should be okay though. I think I have a pretty good idea of how I'm gonna do this. But yeah, so hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you guys in the next one.